The topic for September 2018 for Pathwork Steps, Self-Study Guides, and Online Meetings is Pathwork Lecture 55, 3 Cosmic Principles, the Expanding, the Restricting, and the Static. This is a lecture that I often use as a resting point, which is part of the static principle. I use it as a way to just ground people in energy, to teach about energy divorced from specific personality distortions, divorced from specific concerns, to just teach the essence of the energy, of the principle itself. It's part of what I put in a basket of lectures that I call a toolbox. And these are lectures that can be used later in almost any other topic for any other reason. And some people have an affinity for one tool, some people have an affinity for another. One of the lectures in my toolbox is Pathwork Lecture 233, The Power of the Word. The ability to notice a word, notice how it's resonating, and notice if there's a charge on the word. Is that the word we mean, or is that word covering up something? It's a tool to examine something that you notice. So, Pathwork Lecture 55 is one of the lectures where you read it, or I read it, and you can see the chart in your head, that it lists for each principle the positive aspects and the negative aspects. Because every cosmic principle is neutral. It's a matter of how it's applied, how it's understood, how it's interpreted. So the expanding principle can be a wonderful thing. It can also be a forcing current, a need to go, go, go. The restricting principle or contraction can be a place to come home, a place to integrate, put things together. Or it can be fear-based. The static principle, the guide lists later, is the most misunderstood. It is a place of rest, a place of just being before we go out or before we go back in, but just a pause. When I work with people, I teach to take a pause because it's very, very often we are working in forcing currents. We are rushing out or pulling in. And in that energy, we like being in the energy. It makes us feel alive. And to stop can make us feel frozen and dead. But the kind of static or stasis that I'm speaking of here is a place of pausing and looking. And then you can continue and look. Of going and pausing so that you have an understanding of the energy that you are in the moment. So this harks back to the previous topic, Pathwork Lecture 11, Self-Knowledge and Inner Guidance. So again, there's a big chart on positive and negative aspects of each one of these principles. Principles need to be embodied. They need to be seen in our daily lives. So I spend a lot of time trying to help people see these concepts on a daily, mundane, banal level, because I believe what the lectures say, and that is that every cosmic principle, every spiritual principle is embodied on the planet. It's just a matter of seeing it. One of the best exercises I have found for understanding the rhythm of these 3 pieces and the absolute importance of each one of them is something I learned in massage therapy training. And we did an exercise where we sat in pairs, and we would sit with one person sitting in the back of the other, and we would put our hands on the other person's back. And we would copy their breathing for, I think it was 5 minutes. In my exercise, I just list 2 minutes because it's almost impossible to go for 5 minutes. I'll explain why. To mimic the other person's breathing, to breathe in as they breathe in and at the speed they breathe in. To notice when they stop or when they slide and pause. To notice how their contraction works. And to notice any pauses at any point in their breathing cycle. I recommend heartily that you try this. You can try it with anybody. You can try it with a kid. It's fun. After about 2 minutes, the common experience is that you feel like you're going to suffocate. And the point of this is that that's when you realize how important your rhythm is to every part of your being. By mimicking someone else's cosmic rhythm, you realize that you are now out of alignment with yours. And you're not catching your breath at the same rhythm that makes you feel comfortable in your own skin, in your own body, in your own environment. You're being forced on a fundamental and intimate level to become somebody else. So if you want to understand your cosmic rhythm, it is useful to try to mimic someone else's and realize that you just can't live like that for more than 2 or 3 minutes. Then it's important to turn around and let the other person mimic yours. And then what we did in the class was we discussed what we felt on each one. I remember someone saying that my breathing was erratic. It drove them crazy. There wasn't a smooth in and a smooth out. It seemed like it was all over the place. Doesn't feel like that to me. There are reasons, and the reasons are so complex. We're not looking for the reasons why it happens. We're only looking for the superficial reality. What does your breathing feel like? If somebody else describes your cosmic rhythm, like a second hand going around a clock, where the inhale is in the going down and the exhale is in the going up. What does it feel like to them? Does it feel like you swoop down and climb up slowly? Or do you go down very, very gradually and stop and savor the moment? And they're gasping for air. And then you zip up to the top and they haven't got time to take in the air. Do you pause once, twice, 3 or 4 times? What is your cosmic rhythm? In this minor, mild, non-spiritual exercise, you can find a sense of how you operate in the world that may have been invisible to you before. If you think, for instance, that you don't pause, that your breathing is constant, in and out, you may be surprised to find out that there is almost always a point of stasis, a pause somewhere. And taking that pause away and putting it someplace else, once you, for instance, if you learn your rhythm in this exercise, then you can sit by yourself and practice breathing at a different rhythm and put that pause someplace else. And notice it's like your spine going out of alignment. It doesn't feel right. So in this exercise, I find that it is a good way to understand how the cosmic rhythm is embodied within us and how all 3 principles are necessary. They all exist. They all need to be respected. Our pauses happen when we need them. And when our pauses are artificially moved to the side, we feel a little out of joint. Now, if you expand this exercise into when you eat, when you sleep, when you're slow, when you're fast, when you are social and when you are not social, you can begin to see in all of these activities where you are in an expansive state, when you are in a contractive state, positive contraction, and when you need to pause. Now, one question that's already been asked in the online meetings is they said, but the guide says that exhaling is contraction and inhaling is expansive. That inhaling is contraction and exhale is expansion, and I don't experience it that way. And what I asked them to do, the reason I got that confused is I have the same confusion. Imagine that when you're inhaling, even though your chest goes out, you're pulling in. You're pulling the air in and holding it. And this is the energy that the guide is describing as contraction. When you exhale, you release, you let go. You're not holding it anymore. And this is what the guide is describing as expansion. And then there, of course, is the pause. The third subtopic section was about cosmic principles regarding personality types. And rather than describing it here, I invite you to go to the study guide because I presented some drawings that somebody did that explains it more easily. That some of us are more comfortable in the expansive phase. And so we tend to behave a certain way in groups. Some of us are more comfortable in contraction, and we behave differently in groups. And some of us are more comfortable in stasis, for instance, as observers. And so literally in a room of people, you can see the position of people depending on whether they are engaged, expanding, trying to contract a little bit to understand perhaps, or to observe in a more neutral or static phase. So this is where you can see these cosmic principles in the personality types and how they interact. And the last section is about misconceptions and distortions of the three principles. And in that section, I simply included some of the questions and answers that were asked when the lecture was presented, and the guide's comments on people's what if and how is this and I don't understand this. So it's very useful to hear questions that we might have being asked at the time when the medium was in a trance state. So that's a summary of Pathwork Lecture 55. It does not do the lecture justice, neither does the study guide. I encourage you to download it for free at www.pathwork.org, the main site for the Pathwork Foundation. Thanks for listening.